Okay, so this is gonna be a peculiar Death Battle video. I'm currently very busy with arts and animation school. I developed my first video game, where I worked on some 3D modeling, animating title credits for a potential horror movie, and all kinds of animation stuff. On one hand, it's everything I've ever wanted, I live for this stuff, I finally have classmates I can call friends, but man, I've been feeling overwhelmed lately. Similarly, sometimes when you're a Death Battle combatant, you may or may not be already doomed by the time your opponent's breakdown ends, if not before. Maybe both sides are cheerfully rooting for your demise. Maybe you got a snazzy gimmick that helps you keep up. Maybe classic Death Battle tropes get subverted just to get your hopes up, but put as much distance between you and the truth as you want. Sometimes the only thing that is truly up is your time. Now, in this video I plan to review the 2 Death Battle episodes I gotta catch up to by the time I'm writing the script, analyze the stompy aspects of both, and why not other matchups with similar allegations as well. I'm Maka Krypton, subscribe for more anything or whatever I'm working on at the moment, and let's see if the journey is truly more important than the destination itself. I really dig how the breakdowns and the editing start in this very fairy tale like fashion, promising a fun adventure like Tales of Old. Then bam, tone shift. Overall, I think the explanation for Ruby's power set was really neat, my favorite part being how they go over the pedal burst thingy, because like, yeah, how do you power scale that? It's both super speed, intangibility and molecular control. It's quite broken. Keep this in mind for later. On the topic of keeping Ruby's character intact in a non-molecular sense, however, I did see a non-insignificant amount of people criticize how quickly they go over Ruby's journey in Volume 9. I cannot confirm nor deny that, having dropped the show far earlier, but it's probably not the stuff you want to hear for an episode literally dedicated to the creator of Ruby and inspiration behind this old show, you know? I think the episode is great overall, with a fantastically animated fight and a track that's phenomenal by every metric. But when it comes to its place as episode 200, I think there's some patching up here and there they could have done here and there. Minimal, but it's there. Now onto the franchise I still know extremely little of. I like the soul line at the beginning. Apparently it's how the anime itself starts, so that's nice. There's a lot of musical themed wordplay, fitting since you know, the musical accord Maka and Evans get into to make the magic work. That's nice. I don't think there's any amount of praise I could deliver to properly describe how talented you gotta be to choreograph a sight fight, let alone this well. Like, what do you even use as reference? I don't think enough people praise how amazing that is. Going back to the topic of Ruby's characterization, I've seen some being weirded out by the Volume 9 Ruby having a default personality, since again, apparently that's during a depression era, but that's not really an issue for me since I always took it for granted that the Death Battle goes for the most recognizable prime version of these characters, you know, unless you're Steven Universe Future apparently. Also, I really like the sound of her voice. I don't know, it never came off as annoying to me. Probably helped by the sheer awesomeness of a character's canon voice actor being officially reprised for a Death Battle. Like, loud and proud. I love whenever that happens. I think that's so cool it kinda overrides anything else for me. Maka and Evans sounds fine, I don't know, I have no frame of reference. But speaking of Soul Evans, did you know? Apparently he was animated in the same 2.5D style Deku was a few episodes ago. 3D body, hand-drawn 2D head. The only negative to what's otherwise one of my favorite art styles in Death Battle history is what is done so seamlessly. I often need to be pointed out is not just amazingly well made 2D or 3D. Can you guys tell I totally love the animation for this one yet? Ruby's silver eyes purify Maka's black blood dress in a way that resembles the state at the end of the manga after defeating Azura. No, not that one. While also bringing major angel energy. Wise would be proud. At the end, Maka calls Ruby a simple honest soul, which is the exact description a mentor has been used to describe her, and that's the type of bookending reference I'm quite fond of. More of this and less one-on-one line references. Thank you. Keeping up with the musical motif, When Soul activates the Black Blood powers, he isn't just playing any random tune, but he's playing Paper Moon, the opening of Soul Eater Season 2. When I found that out, it really reminded me of at the times when they used to incorporate actual franchise music in the fight themselves, you know, before the copyright hell landscape we never really left. So yeah, there's that. Now correct me if I'm wrong, since this is 1% Soul Eater stuff, but I've seen some theorize that due to Ruby's aura being red, something will make her appear like a Kishin egg in the so perceptive eyes of Maka, there might be an in-universe reason for the latter, why the latter would generally pick the former as a target for whipping, as Ruby's sky blue honest soul would only be visible after dying. Adds to the tragedy, doesn't it? Also again, this is me quoting Soul Eater fans, but not only Maka should be fully able to resurrect Ruby since Evans didn't hit her, but she's the type of character, but apparently she's the type of person that will resurrect Ruby only to clarify that her and Soul are not a couple. That's honestly hilarious. Quite a fake out to have Maka be the one to pull the trump card first, really took me off guard for 2 solid seconds. Okay, all jokes aside, and despite what I'm gonna say later regarding this very notion, I do really like how this animation solidly displays Ruby's superior skill. After Maka tries to drag Ruby closer with the scythe for the second time, the latter is prepared as she punches the Soul Reaper as soon as she gets yanked, using the brief moment to semblance away and snipe Maka from a safe distance. Besides the amazing choreography and visuals, I think this scene right here is the highlight of this fight, and I swear it's not just because that Perky got, it's not just because of the sheer funny factor of the Perky got shooting someone in the face in response to getting clobbered a bit too much, with the latter barely dodging as she ducks out of the way. There's some death battles where seeing someone just getting punched, no flashy attacks or summons or anything, is just unexpectedly funny. Maybe just me though. Not only is this scene hilarious, it's also a neat portrayal of Maka's reflexes and foreshadowing how much Ruby's few advantages rely entirely outside factors, in this case her sight gun. Maka is all her own power. Also, Ruby eats the same pose she did in the Red trailer, which is really cute. Given well everything surrounding the topic of Ruby, both the character and the show, her death was always gonna be something to be handled rather delicately. I ultimately think they pull it off just fine here. Sure, getting vertically sliced in half is no peaceful way to go, but I appreciate the artistic tact of censoring blood with petals, as Ruby's sight now symbolizes death in another way, the funerary kind. I still can't help but feel sorry for Ruby though. She tries her best to stay alive after hearing her sister's voice, and it just isn't enough to outdo Soul and Maka outpower a friendship better to that. This WinCon is just not as fun when both sides are literally empowered by friends and family, you know? The other component of this episode I can wholeheartedly say was made with pure episode 200 energy from start to finish is the track itself. I don't think there's enough good things I can say about Dead in Bloom, so let me start with a fun fact. The only reason why I knew of this expression as a non-native English speaker was because of the Lord Hater vs. Lemongrab that is in bloom as side to side.
Cannibalistic waste backfire when you're eaten by your own patterns. Your rapping methods are blind, despite your cruel eyes. This in bloom is side to side of fat skeletons divide.
It's a clever enough title, you know, blooming, flowers, roses, Ruby, Maka literally going to school run by the Grim Reaper. It works. But no, we must talk about lyrics. Wholly emotionally captivating lyrics, Batman. Apparently Ruby reaches her darkest hour point, and my god do these starting lyrics get me in that headspace. Imagine bumping to your death battle playlist, then you get hit with a line on the same level as "They say every ending brings new opportunity, but how does that carry any sense of meaning?" I would have an existential crisis between reps. Have a loving Jesus, man. And making the main hook being a Monty Harm homage? Just rip my heart out of my chest, man. It will hurt a lot less. With all that being said though, the Japanese lyrics are overall happier in both tone and word choice, so it kinda feels as if the latter is playfully running circles around the former, who's having a whole ass existential crisis in comparison. Not only you get the primary composer of Ruby's soundtrack to come back with the same energy of a Ruby track, not only goes hard as hell in a blend of English and Japanese lyrics to reflect Ruby and Maka respectively, but the track art is one of the most perfectly balanced in Death Battle history. The crazy Soul Eater moon with a blaring ruby silver eye, completely covered in black blood and partially destroyed like the one in Remnant, with the two sides stuck on each end. Like, it's flawless, man. It's not for every track art I can say they did it in the most perfectly conceivable way possible, but it is the case for this one. When it comes to narrative themes, however, I'd say it could be something along the lines of specialization versus generalization. While both Ruby and Maka had a lot of soul shenanigans powers going on, only Ruby is the one whose entire arsenal, skill set and power set hinge on it. Her aura is what gives her semblance, dust activation and enhanced physical stats. Take that away and she's just as helpless as any girl her age would be in this scenario. She canonically cannot throw a punch to save her life. Like, if I were Ruby's parents, I would constantly live under existential dread of there being, I don't know, an aura snatcher praying after my daughter or something. I couldn't imagine being her mother. Sure, Maka is younger, but she still has more options no matter what, outside of raw power. At the end of the day, this was probably the second saddest ending Ruby ever got. My main takeaway from the breakdowns is that the comic book editing is great as usual. I never intend to take that for granted, but thinking about Buffy's forced resurrection after a lifetime of struggle and yearning for peace, only to be forcefully flung back into all that chaos once again, like damn man. It's just depressing. I haven't watched anything from her franchise, but that just sounds like one of the most depressing scenarios I've ever heard for a character, Jesus. I'm more on a comic book side of things, so you know, whenever a character is brought back to life, it usually calls for celebration, but that does sound like a tragic reconstruction on that. And speaking of comics, it's pretty funny that if Buffy did stay dead, then Blade probably would have won since the crazy stuff she got happened after both her and the show were forcefully brought back from the dead. That being said though, they probably did too much of a good job going over how much Buffy matches Blade arsenal blow for blow, bar for bar. Like, there is such thing as subtle foreshadowing, you know? My favorite personal example is when in Galactus vs Unicorn, when they finally mention Galactus defeating an embodiment of pure evil, go into detail about Unicorn being pure evil, and then bring back what Galactus defeated with a little bow at the end. You know what they say though, you can't end with a bang without starting with one. No one says that. I'm not very good at transitions, okay? I honestly think the actor for Blade did a good job. The mannerisms, martial arts, pure and fitted aura. Like, this is Blade, straight up. I can perfectly see this as a younger take on the character that rocks his Marvel rival's haircut, movie dialogue and comic book weaponry. I honestly love when they properly composite a character in such evenly distributed fashion, as much as the first line did catch me off guard. Apparently it's because he was tired from previously shot fight scenes and fake teeth aren't easy to talk through, but even then it's the only negative of his performance. Blade kicking ass and aura farming is accurate no matter how familiar you are with the character, but regarding how accurate Buffy is, apparently her going holy shit, okay I got this, is perfectly accurate from what I read, so all is well and good. But can we talk about the 200th episode being immediately followed by like the best setup in the show's history? Finally topping Homelander? If I were to list each and every single reason why, we'd probably quickly get into double digits. Funnily enough, this very setup results in a bloody vampire massacre that reaches the double digits before the digital combatants share a single hit. It's like someone took the so much for the death in Death Battle as personally as possible. It is the longest setup in Death Battle history, yet doesn't feel dragged in the slightest. Like, there are entire battles that end before a blade reaches out to the girl. Sometimes the secret is all in good pacing, something certain episodes could learn from. The overall tone is straight out of the Blade movies, but the way vampires disintegrate is apparently more aligned with Buffy, so that's a great way to establish this shared crossover verse. Instead of establishing Chekhov's gun and letting them go to waste, this setup gives Blade a reason to use his anti-vampire gear on people where it would actually work, aka not Buffy. It's like they're solving a problem before it even exists. This whole segment feels as if they looked at Chief Slayer and Jason Meyer and said, okay, let's do a bit of that, except it's peak. Yes, I remember the latter had production issues, but still, we're comparing finishing products here. Again, on the topic of previous episodes, this setup feeling like a realistic reason for characters to meet and fight, with this much extra awesomeness being peppered throughout, just makes it a massive standout. We all love to praise the writing in the later seasons, but remember that it's only been a season or two since two guys literally went grrr and then punched each other. I like how they went full Smash Bros in the way that everyone is here. There's something brilliant about that battle cast appearing in a live action fight only to be all murdered by the combatants. There's Liam, Chad, Ben, Sam, and apparently this is Jocelyn. Goddamn, Akane who? Shout out in particular to DJ Vampire, who enjoyed every instant of the once in a lifetime occasion of Blade and Buffy showing up at the same pub, up until his very openly embraced disintegration. Talk about leaving an impression, this season has really been going all out in terms of absolute stand-up characters who aren't even in the title of the fight they're in. Just for the hell of it, let's go into the specific of this scene, shall we? Blade ripping a page out of Johnny Blaze's handbook by stylishly blasting hellfire like there's no tomorrow a la Terminator, Buffy using her immense experience for a crossbow multi-kill, Blade suplexing a vampire empress to a table, Blade grabbing the aforementioned arrow, using it like a stake, and basically working together with another vampire slayer for an instant, worsening the tragedy that's gonna ensue soon after, and in general every single vampire failing to land a single punch, perfectly establishing these two as badasses, which in turn builds hype for the fight between them. This setup takes full, unadulterated advantage for the medium it exists in. The various emotions expressed by all characters, the eminence of the villainess, the tragedy of Blade, Buffy's inherent protection of woman, is the best live action episode by an embarrassing landslide. This was made and felt like a short film, with its own story and lived characters and world building, and of course, the inciting incident that kickstarted this fight to begin with. I know the living gun is intended for demons, but the more you fear being shot, the more it hurts apparently, so being shot in the brain was probably the most merciful option. If we follow the rules established by the Buffy half of this shared universe, vampire victims don't immediately turn evil as soon as they turn, so in her eyes, Blade just remorselessly killed a victim that could have been saved. Even as someone whose only experience with Buffy was the breakdown she got minutes earlier, I immediately emotionally connected to why this would make her want to fight Blade, kickstarting a possibly little fight between the two and placing Blade as the one who is self-defense the whole time. Yeah, I think that I went over a dozen things or so in there. Regarding the fight itself, it's very well choreographed. My favorite beats include Buffy weaponizing a jacket, taking Blade off guard with a surprising Slayer strength, the enclosed fight in this red-lit bathroom, with a third joke for some reason, obligatory Blade movie nods, everything about the Slayer sight, including slicing the face off the living gun, honestly everything about the ultimate weapons, it's where they both receive equal weight and importance, and then there's the death itself. It's good really, definitely the best live action one, and I can totally get Blade not predicting the sheer slicey diciness of this thing, Lord knows I didn't. Neon Ash is a very interesting track. Not only is fittingly the longest in the show's history, given what's basically a short movie we got in this episode, but it's also split in 3 acts, again like a film. The first act is very EDM dubstep coded, you know, the now classic Blade dun 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 dun. Whereas the second act is more in line with the fighting rock music you'd hear during most death battles, while an unholy orchestra choir chimes in full force for the third act. Fitting for these two layers of the unholy. All to end on what I immediately recognized to be a version of Buffy theme song. And that must mean something was done really well, since I never even heard of Buffy theme song. I just figured that's what it was referencing, you know? One thing is clear, this track had a mission and I accomplished it very well if you ask me. Narratively speaking, and as sorry as I am to say this, there isn't much to work with here. Maybe quality versus quantity? Because sure, Blade had more versatile options. Machine guns, magic swords, actual armor, actually healing factor and so forth. But that means very little when Buffy takes strength, speed and skills by 1,000 years margin. And again, when all else fails, space-time sight. At the end of the day, the only thing Blade was able to kill was the dance floor. Now that I gave each episode its own spotlight, what did we learn, kids? I'd say that episodes that feature STOMP matchups can still be quite awesome. I mean, look at how Omnilander and Aquabob capitalized on the brutality and humor of it respectively, but the way that battles format works doesn't always convey that. I've been highly vocal about my annoyance towards the lack of result screens in the last 3 or 4 episodes, because I still think it's the best way to convey that battle's interpretation of things. Bar none. It's quick, easy to read and comprehend, and there's still something going on the left side of the screen for your Subway surfing attention span pleasure. Both mainstream viewers and Death Battle fans get all the info they need without losing anything. But when it comes to the category charts we've been getting since Goku vs Superman the 3rd, things get kinda muddy. Look at Bowser vs Eggman for example. As phenomenal as that episode is, general consensus says it's close. The results charts says it's close. The black box says it's close. But if you go by these charts alone, you'd get the idea that Ivo Robotnik stands nearly 0 chances of winning unless he gets ridiculously lucky with a trump card power up. It took me a while, but I can now see why some Robotnik fans didn't like that very much. Intelligence has been infamously shut down as a pity point ad nauseum by now, but I can see why someone would think this, since they don't really elaborate on why Eggman being smarter would matter in this debate, just as he is. Then you got episodes with the power of God and anime on their side, where the charts work surprisingly well. Yeah, Shigaraki indeed takes stats and acts to an embarrassing degree, but Maito still needs non-physical methods for his survivability to actually be affected. So in this specific episode, the charts work surprisingly fine, and you get the results charts anyway if you want slightly more detail, so everyone wins. In the same way Maito's nifty tricks allow this confrontation to last a little more than execution, both in the animation and debate, Giorno's GER was not only its only advantage in the results charts, with this screenshot still being one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life, but what kept him from getting stat and act stomped by Joker for 3 full minutes. The episode does this very visually clever thing where GER literally rewinds Joker's speed and resistance advantages to 0, visually showcasing even in this method how much this wasn't a full complete stomp, with GER involved at least. And again, the result charts is right here anyway, so everyone is happy. Then we fast forward to these 2 episodes, and from now on I'm gonna be paraphrasing non-218's arguments. Maka very much physically stomps Ruby from Revenant and back in terms of strength, but while the equalized speeds argument can work for pedal burst, it kinda hinges on ignoring how much faster Maka got since the beginning of the manga where she got her speed stat from. Meanwhile, with Blade vs Buffy, they kinda give the latter every physical advantage despite a much more solid argument for equalized speeds. I get it, they want to try some humor there at the end, And sure, Ruby has been doing their thing for longer, but the side-3 advantage kinda stops working when you realize Soul moves by its own anyway, so if anything is a disadvantage for Ruby since she has to physically move the side herself with much less strength behind those noodle arms. While Blade had actual ways to kill Buffy, Ruby's supposed advantages are kinda hollow in comparison. I mean, look at these fan-made results charts I found on Reddit for Buffy vs Blade. Doesn't it convey more clearly Blade's chances of victory and the blow-for-blow rhythm for the fight itself? Keeping it in the Marvel territory, Ghost Rider vs Spawn uses category charts also surprisingly well. Like, yeah, Zeratos takes power advantage, but when Spawn has literally every single counter power and resisted in the book, plus the skills and training to use them properly against Johnny's bomb ass, who's not gonna go all out first things first while staying in character, that gives Simmons more than enough time to strategize and pull a win. So the stars charts actually end up strengthening and supporting what's an already peak cinema episode. Now granted, with Simon vs Kyle, physical stats are kinda virtually meaningless, it's just that Simon took all the ones that mattered. Time with Kyle only 1. They both had something the other couldn't deal with. Kyle could adapt to Simon's probability missiles, Simon could adapt to Kyle constructs, however Simon took potential and by extension willpower. Meaning that by that battle interpretation, Kyle didn't have a single worthwhile advantage. Still though, I still think it's pretty weird to not give the Green Lantern the imagination point. I elaborate more on that on my review though. What I'm trying to get across with all this yapping is that the category method can work if done well and or accompanied by an equally well thought out results charts, but if you remove the latter and don't do the former properly, you kinda end up in a weird situation where losers can somehow get more and less credit than what they would arguably deserve. Or maybe you get so focused about how close it is that you end up in situations like Ruby having a full advantage over Maka that not even Godzilla had against Hawk. With that being said, Hawkzilla kinda does something great in that regard, since they still had Godzilla lose in a thematically sound fashion that worked only thanks to the very unique criteria set by their own interpretation of the fight, aka Hawk giving Banner limitless time to create an orthogonal diagonal gauntlet in a car, without a box of scraps. So at the end of the day, that battle's format isn't really all good or all bad, but a little bit of everything, like the very humans that work on and support their content. And I wouldn't want it any other way. Dante vs Clive was neat, but I still have zero drive to dedicate a full review about it, for now at least, sorry. Doing lots of other, I'll do the same. Hoku Krypton, hoping I made the fight between you and the harsh day you've been having slightly less stumpy.